Mansions, private jets, expensive cars, and hundreds of millions in untaxed income. This is the never-ending story of faith and money. How popular churches and ministers use faith to line their own pockets with cold, hard cash. There comes a time in all our lives that we struggle. Someone gets sick, there's a big medical treatment you can't afford, like a surgery. Or you're simply stuck in life trying to make ends meet. But you can't see a way out of the situation, no matter how hard you try. But there are people who offer solutions to these problems.
If you build God's house, He will build your house.
Most of us have probably seen them on TV or online with their fancy suits and big stages, looking like they have all the answers in the world, promising you eternal happiness and solutions to all the problems in your life, saying things like God has sent them to you because He has heard your prayers and is here to give you the solution to all of it. And all you gotta do is just send a little bit of money to the guy on the screen.
I'm going to ask you to sow an exceptional and uncommon seed of $1,000.
To click on that donation button to sow $1,144.
So God is giving you the harvest, and the harvest of the seed you sow. You can't expect a harvest if you don't sow seed, spiritual, physical, or financial.
And you'll be happier than ever. In this video, we will look at a few preachers and their stories, and why these kinds of people might need to be stopped, or at the very least, treated as a business and not as a house of faith. Kenneth and Gloria Copeland. Now these are the OG of preachers of this kind. Kenneth Copeland is an American televangelist. Along with his wife Gloria, they run Eagle Mountain International Church since 1967. Now they are worth around $300 to $700 million depending on your sources. And with them being full-time preachers, you can see where that money came from. They live in an estate worth $7 million. And the best part is it's tax exempt since it's registered as a parsonage and part of the church. In fact, most churches pay zero to little taxes in most countries, which hands even more money to them. Kenneth is remembered by his statement when he said that flying commercial is like getting in a metal tube filled with demons. A very compassionate man who relates to the working class.
If I flew commercial, I'd have to stop 65% of what I'm doing.
Another is Hinn, an Israeli-born preacher, most known for his miracle crusades that are usually held in big stadiums with conferences across the world, where he says he performs miracles and heals the sick. Now, this is no modest man. He's worth over $60 million. Hinn and his family, who work in the church, are encouraged to show a life of luxury and good living by shopping at the best stores, eating in the fanciest restaurants, and wearing high-end clothing whenever seen in public. So they can exude the sense of high class that can be achieved when being associated with the Hinn ministries. Next, we have Hubert Angel. Now let's meet a man who's just indescribable in his shenanigans. He was born Hubert Mudzanire in Zimbabwe, but Angel had a better ring to it, I suppose. He found a church called Spirit Embassy, where he goes around in his helicopter to preach his message. This man is so influential, he swindled his way into being an ambassador of Zimbabwe to Europe and the Americas. I learned about him when he graced a sports magazine predicting that Liverpool would win the EPL in 2014. But he was wrong. They let the trophy slip in the last games. There was also a story of him buying his wife a very pink Lamborghini for Valentine's Day. He also mentors other pastors, most notably Shepherd Bushiri, who can fly. Seriously, watch the video when you're done with this one, and thank me later. I always assumed that Hubert was just another pastor. And then I saw him on Al Jazeera documentary arranging to smuggle gold and cash using his diplomatic passport.
Right now I can put a bag like this with 1.2 billion and put a red tape written diplomat. That's it.
And he's also on the list of people who paid for fake degrees, which is organized by the US Department of Justice, just to make it a little better. How to ask for money. What all these preachers have in common is something they call the prosperity gospel, which teaches that financial blessing and physical well-being are always the will of God, and that faith, positive speech, and donations to religious causes will increase one's material wealth. And this is done in two ways. One, by targeting the most affluent members of the society. These kinds of preachers get close to them and their families, giving things like personal advice and prayers. This is done to gain the trust of the rich people, by providing a sense of spiritual security and meaning that they can only provide. They render themselves as indispensable to the rich. So when they finally ask for large sums of money, they will not hesitate to give it to them, as they have already formed a bond akin to a family of sorts. You might say, what's the problem with hustling your way into some cash as long as it's rich people and they won't be hurt by that? And you might be right, but now comes the more sinister part of the tale. The other way of gaining that money is by asking the common people, like you and me. They ask largely vulnerable people that are facing some kind of crisis in their life, be it sickness, debts, family issues, legal issues, what have you. They specifically target these people and ask them to send money so they can be healed and delivered through these preachers. But first, they will need to sow a seed of faith in some form of payment. And more often than not, these people are desperate and are giving their last dime to have their problem solved by these charlatans. Once they have received the payment, they promise a whole sort of miracles and healings that never come because they are just con artists, but with a Bible. Now let's see a few stories from across the sphere of supposed miracle workers. Brighton Moyo was a Zimbabwean man who worked in South Africa in a lumber factory. He was deeply involved in the church run by Pastor Alf Lukau, who claims to be a prophet of some kind. Brighton believed in the church and the pastor so much that he would do anything the pastor tells him. Now Alf is a fantastic character. His website says if you pay him, you'll be a king. And in 2016, he said that he can get women a husband within 90 days, for the right price, of course. So if you're in a hurry for a man, Pastor Alf got you. He's the perfect wingman. Now back to Brighton. Somehow this pastor convinced him to climb into a coffin and pretend to be dead so the pastor can resurrect him back to life. But how do you know he was not really dead and faking it, you ask? Well, you can watch the video yourself. He was clearly breathing and moving in the coffin. And the claim was a neighbor saw the body's fingers moving while the funeral car passed the church. Now this is a closed coffin in a windowless back of a car, so I'll let you fill in the gaps there. When the media got a hold of this and started asking questions, they found from his co-workers that Brighton is an avid follower of the pastor and even pretended to be paralyzed and on a wheelchair so he can be healed by the pastor. Although the story is funny, the sad part is that the worst crime Brighton committed is believing in the con man. Later, after the story broke, Brighton fled back to Zimbabwe to avoid ridicule and died of pneumonia. Lamore Whitehead, a chain-wearing Rolls-Royce driving pastor in New York, has recently been in the news for being prosecuted for fraud. But the story I want to touch on is of an encounter he had with a woman named Pauline Anderson. In 2021, she sued him claiming he defrauded her of her life savings. Pauline said that in November 2020, while she was recovering from surgery, Whitehead approached her to assist her to getting a better credit score and buying and renovating a house for the low price of $90,000, which she gave him after emptying her life savings. Whitehead has promised her to pay back in full while adding a further $100 a month until the house was done. But when she didn't receive neither her new home nor her money back, Pauline asked our good old bishop what was going on. And in May 2021, he texted her saying that her payment was not an investment, but a campaign contribution, and that he is not obliged to pay her back. The case is still ongoing. Bonnie Parker was a believer and follower of the teachings of Kenneth Copeland. When she was diagnosed with cancer in 2004, after watching Kenneth and Gloria on TV, she elected to sow thousands of dollars of all she had to their ministry, believing their teaching that she would be healed. Parker's daughter, Christy, said that the Copelands convinced their mother that if she went to a doctor, it was a sin. You didn't believe enough if you did. She died, donating to the Copelands church until the day of her death. Another example is Ashnil Prakash. Ashnil was a 10-year-old kid who had not one, but 2 brain tumors, which rendered him blind, unable to talk, and completely paralyzed. Being informed by the doctors that Ashnil will soon die, his parents started looking for other options to save their son's life. They were filled with hope when in advertisements, especially targeting families in desperate situations, they heard about the miracle healing crusades of Benny Hinn on TBN. The couple totally believed what they heard and made the decision to bring their son Ashnil to Benny Hinn's crusade, expecting a miracle. Even with all the people there, many of whom were also desperate and hoping for a miracle, the family did not give up hope. Finally came the moment they had been waiting for. The crowd was stirred into a frenzy by those words of Benny Hinn. "I am here to tell you that you will be healed tonight. All you have to do is accept it." These people were more than willing to accept a miracle. After having impressed the multitude with his ability to make hordes of people fall over, without losing any time, Benny Hinn immediately gave his money collection speech. Cleverly concocted with the threat of an economic collapse, Benny Hinn asked the bewildered and frightened crowd to sow monetary seeds for their own protection. On the donation forms, Mr. and Mrs. Prakash read the suggestion to give between $10,000 and $200. So they made the big sacrifice and sowed $2,000 at the crusade. They'd also agreed every month to give $100 out of their paychecks to Benny Hinn's ministries. After all that, the chance finally came. Ashnil was brought on stage to be healed by Hinn. After placing his hands on the kid's face, he said, "Expect a miracle. The Lord is going to touch you, young boy." Days after that happened, he still wasn't healed, but the parents were not fazed. They donated even more money with the belief that their son would eventually be healed. 7 weeks later, Ashnil would succumb to his illness and pass away. These multimillionaires are asking poor, or at the very least vulnerable people who are desperate and looking for a way out of their situation, large amounts of money. In many instances, these people don't have. It's all fun and games on the surface, and we can sit here and make fun of them all day long, but as soon as a real person is mentioned who is a victim, the real harm becomes apparent. I'm not a religious person, but didn't Jesus these guys represent say, "It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God"? In my opinion, they should be stopped, and without any proof, no one should claim to be a healer, religious or not. These are con artists at best, and at worst, murderers. They knowingly exploit people in harsh situations for their own monetary gain. Jail would be a kind sentence. But what do you think of these so-called men and women of God? Do you believe they are real healers, or is there something more sinister going on? Or do you have your own story with them? Let us know in the comments. And thank you for watching.